guys, including Marshall and I guess Luke especially, but uh, Brandon and Calvin too. Also, um, the felonies committed by Scott and Maddie Scherr and John Goen's parents. I don't remember their first names, so I'll call them Mr. and Mrs. Goen. Um, you know, what a divorce decree is sets out shared custody for a purpose, to try to give the kids a structure with both parents. And like Judge Langley said in court one time, very accurately said, the tail is wagging the dog. You don't want the kids in charge, or the kids will just make everything convenient for themselves without any regard for the problems of structure that parents in an organized society also have. Um, but so the felonies that Scott and Maddie Scherr committed, which had I called the police, we would have had a record of and a prosecutable record of, were interference with child custody. The weekend that Marshall went to that party was a weekend he refused to get in the car with his dad. But regardless of what Marshall did or didn't do, it was my weekend by law, and that law was established by the decree, not by the legislature, but by the decree that Debbie and I agreed to with the judge's signature. Right? Right. So when I went over there to get Marshall, and uh, he went in, I carried him to the car, and Mrs. Scherr said, "Look, let him come in the house and get his shoes and other things." I said, "Okay." And so she harbored Marshall in the house until Debbie got there. And she called Debbie, and Debbie picked him up and took him away. Both of those are felonies. What Mrs. Scherr did and what Debbie did are both felonies. It's called interference with child custody, and you can look it up. That's a felony. All right. So um, I don't remember if it was that same weekend or another weekend, but it was designated a dad weekend. I think it was the same one, but I can't remember for sure. I went over to John Goen's house and rang the bell, and they wouldn't come outside but talk to me through the door. I said, "I'm here to get Luke. It's my weekend, and he's disobeying his dad, and he needs to come with me. And then when I decide he can come over here, he can come over here." They harbored him. Now, if I had called the police, they'd have come and they'd have talked to Mr. and Mrs. Goen and said, "Do you have authority of this child?" And Luke was a child. And they'd have said no. And I'd have showed them the decree and said, "I have authority." You don't want the tail wagging the dog. And I spent the week, a couple of days with Luke. And when you let those kids run the show, the tail is wagging the dog. And they're sharp, they're smart, they know how to work things like that. But anyway, the Church of Christ is very legalistic. So if their Gestapo looks at this, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But they also justify themselves. So this will cause things to stir a little bit by pointing this out to you guys. If in fact you're insane enough to take advice from the cult of Christ, which is why I call it a cult. Uh, the men are in charge, and the elders are in charge, and they're the authorities never to be questioned. And when it's handy, they do things um, like most humans do, but without. It gets very, very dangerous when it becomes the people in charge that cannot be questioned, like the elders and Bob Walker and Sid Walker and Gail Vermillion, and that story. That story is kind of our poster child of how they mush things around to give themselves a pass but hold you accountable. which is what Gomer Pyle said to Barney Fife. There's two sets of laws, one for the police and one for the rest of it. You with me? Oh, Barney was giving himself the excuse for making a U-turn. Barney, the deputy sheriff, really good show. Okay. I thought it was important to point that out as y'all try to connect all the dots looking back. And if Luke had said, "You're right, Dad, your authorities this weekend, may I go to John Goen's?" I'd have said, "Heck yeah, I always let you go to John Goen's. I just don't want you kicking sand in my face, uh, circumventing the authority that I had to fight Debbie tooth and nail just to be here. All right, go get them."